Congressman Walsh, as always, great to talk with you.
Wonderful to be with you again.
And I want to talk to you about your Second Amendment Protection Act. But first, your reaction to yesterday's testimony from Attorney General Eric Holder. What did you take away from that?
My takeaway is he's stonewalling. It's almost it seems almost pointless having him come before these committees because he's just not providing information. And I think he's hurting himself. I think he's hurting the administration because every time he's done this, he's only ratcheted up the pressure to really have a real thorough independent investigation on Fast and Furious.
I think you're so right. I mean, you listened to him yesterday, and he just kept digging a deeper and deeper hole. And what about the fact that he admitted, you know what, we haven't turned over all the documents, and we have no plans to do that?
Again, coming from any Republican attorney general or Republican administration, those would be really startling words. And they should be. And I'll tell you, that's a real, you know what, that's a real almost an FU to Congress, challenging us now to continue to further investigate this. It makes one think that he knows something's there for him to willingly not cooperate.
Yeah, I mean, there's calls for impeachment now. ICE to let him know that we can hold you in contempt of Congress. Yeah. And I'm sure the administration is saying, yeah, sure, but you're right. They have left you guys no other option.
We have no other option, and the public pressure here is so intense because I'll tell you, Americans, I think across my district and across a lot of districts are really, really very upset, shall we say, with what they know about Fast and Furious.
Yep, and we're still searching for the truth.
Oh, God, yeah. And you know what? This is going to take some time, and it's going to take an independent investigation. And I've said from the beginning that this was a tragic, this was a deadly mistake by Holder and his department, and it was completely botched in how they handled it. Those two reasons alone, as far as I'm concerned, are reason for his dismissal. Yeah. But his behavior now in not cooperating with letting the American people get to the bottom of what happened is very troubling.
Yeah. Switching gears, you're leading the charge to stop any attempt by the UN to include the civilian ownership in its arms trade treaty that they're pushing. Tell us what your legislation would do.
It's basically, it's H.R. 3594. It's the Second Amendment Protection Act. And it would basically block U.S. funding to the United Nations if the UN continues to seek gun control measures affecting U.S. citizens. You know, the Arms Trade Treaty, we're expecting the final draft sometime next year. All the information we're getting shows that this treaty, at the very least, is going to contain some gun control requirements, possibly requiring gun owner registration, perhaps micro-stamping of ammunition. There could be even bans on some semi-automatic firearms. Outrageous backdoor attempts by this administration to try to enact gun control, avoiding the normal, proposals through Congress.
And that's a very good point, because I was interviewing and talking with John Bolton the other day, and he says that this is a post-American president. But don't you think all of us, not just gun owners, need to be concerned, because this is an administration that's made clear that Obama thinks, the UN should have more to say over the way we do business in this country?
Absolutely. I mean, we thought long and hard about drafting legislation blocking U.S. funding to the UN if this administration allows the UN to impose any restrictions on any issues when it comes to U.S. citizens, because it's not just guns. I mean, there are things pertaining to parental rights and some other issues that I know this administration is looking into with the UN, which completely go against our Constitution and our individual rights. gun control, this arms trade treaty is so scary that we thought it was helpful first to just focus on it.
And I mean, what is scary is that, and I think you'd agree with this, what's at stake is our freedom and our sovereignty. And we're talking about countries there that are going to vote on this treaty. They don't even know what freedom is.
For this administration and this president to place anything that the United Nations says above our own constitutional rights is beyond frightening. And the fact that this arms trade treaty that we are even participating in the drafting of should be an outrage to the American people. Most folks just aren't aware of it.
And I was going to ask you, and that is a concern, isn't it? Because most people really aren't aware what goes inside those four walls of that building, and that's the way the UN likes it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, when the final draft hits sometime next year, it's going to surprise a lot of people when they really get into the details. But again, you and I know this is, certainly in my lifetime, this is the most anti-gun president I've ever known. I still do believe that's ultimately the motive behind Fast and Furious, was to make the case for gun control on Americans. I have no doubt that this president is looking at a way to restrict Americans' Second Amendment rights through some United Nations language with this arms trade treaty next year.
You know, when you bring up Operation Fast and Furious, and you go to the UN, and you're sitting in there, and you listen to these arguments, and Mexico, it's leading the charge. And they say, you know, they've made clear we want sportsmen and we want civilian firearms in this treaty.
It's just craziness. The United Nations is craziness. I mean, we listen to countries like formerly Libya and Syria talk to us about human rights. It's silly. It's silly how much attention we pay to this body when this is an anti-American and certainly an anti-Israeli body. But this is a whole nother level now of, when it comes to this arms trade treaty, of our Americans' constitutional rights being circumvented.
Absolutely. It's the Second Amendment Protection Act. What are you hearing as far as support?
We introduced it yesterday.
Okay.
We've already got a number of co-sponsors. A lot of members of Congress are very excited about this. Interestingly, a number of congressmen, Republican and Democrat, have kept their eyes on this issue. They're aware of the arms trade treaty. So I think we are going to spend the next week or so garnering just as many co-sponsors as we can, because we've got to put a spotlight on this issue so that it doesn't sneak up and surprise Americans next year. And
that the Americans remember this issue when they go to the polls, next November.
Absolutely. This itself should be a major issue. It goes to the fact that this president is almost a post-American president, as John Bolton says. He does not believe in American supremacy.
So what can gun owners do to help you get this thing moving?
The bill number is H.R. 3594. It's the Second Amendment Protection Act of 2011. They should get on the phone or email their own representative and make sure they are a co-sponsor of H.R. 3594.